Do you sprechen Sie the Lingity?
Every problem is an opportunity to level up.
What do you think the last miracle was in heaven?
Heaven doesn't see problems, it sees possibilities.
Oh, everything is possible.
Welcome to the Epoch Podcast and another dose of mental foreplay. My name's Matt.
I'm Jen.
I'm Austin.
I'm Christina.
And I'm David.
And today we are diving into a video from Graham Cooke. It's in our library. The video is The Language of Heaven. So, do you guys speak the language of heaven?
Sprechen Sie heaven, die?
Shaba.
Yeah.
Oh my word, that was good.
I think I would hope that I do. I think one of the things he talked about was that really, he said it at first and I was like, what? That's weird. But then he explained it and he said that, you know, we live in a world where there's problems, but there's no problems in heaven. And I was like, oh yeah, it's perfect. Duh.
Mm.
So even just putting that whole construct of here, there is different. And then how do you get there or make it not different? I don't know.
Graham Cooke's always been one of my favorites. For me, I've always wanted to just kind of like, it reminds me of just somebody I want to hug, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so not unassuming just how he presents a new way to think about things. And I remember just kind of diving into his teachings for months and months and months and months a few years ago. And I've kind of forgot, because it's so unassuming, I've kind of forgotten how drastically he changed the way that I view everything.
Hmm.
And his major kind of, one of his major mantras is that there is no such thing as a problem, and that all problems are opportunities. And it's it's one of those things that sounds fancy or sounds like, oh yeah, that's cute, cutesy on the surface. But when you hear him explain it and explain like, no, this is really not how it's supposed to work, especially as a believer, especially in the kingdom and everything, that you begin to realize, oh my gosh, I really have failed to see that I live in heaven, right? That I failed to see that I am seated there, and I failed to see that everything did change 2,000 years ago. And Graham Cooke doesn't spend a lot of time on the grace message. He doesn't spend a lot of time on kind of getting into deep, thick doctrine on where we are dispensationally and all this stuff. He just kind of says, if you are a Christian, if you are someone who has entered into the kingdom, then maybe you should start thinking differently about some things. And then he just gives you story after story and example after example. And it's a lot of fun to kind of reminisce about just how many small little things changed when I spent those months, as he was a primary teacher for me for a while.
Yeah, I was trying to look at my notes. I'm not seeing it in my notes, but do you guys remember when he said something about God being, it's basically like God being tuned to, and unless I'm thinking something wrong, but God being tuned to AM and you're tuned to FM, and did you guys write anything about that down? Or is that not
I
what I'm...
don't remember that in this video.
Oh, well, maybe that's why I can't find it. It must be something else. I was thinking about it because of the whole language thing, but and like not being on the same wavelength, basically, how heaven is just in a different way of looking at things than what the world looks at things. But wherever I got that from, it was a good illustration. There was something that went with it. So I guess that wasn't this. But the concept is still valid. Like the world tunes into all the negativity, and God's not even bothering to tune into that at all, in the sense that he's always on the I am wavelength, the AM wavelength. It kind of goes together there. I don't know.
Oh, that's jazzy.
Yeah.
And IAM.
Shaba.
Yes.
Well, Well, I liked that he talked about, if you have a problem, there's this problem. And he did this old little like miming spiel on the phone, talking about my problem and, oh, you don't have a problem. I'm sorry. And the whole concept of that, the problem is here, but the blessing or the promise, the reward for that problem is so much greater. And so it's kind of like when you think about having a problem, it's there to test you, it's there to train you, it's there to level you up. And if you can just push through that, then the reward's going to be there. So
I thought that little what is it, monologue?
Yeah.
Was hilarious because at first, he's like, the other person is like, oh, I'm sorry. He's like, yeah, I'm dealing with something. And the other person, he acts like the other person said, I'm sorry. Oh, no, it's all right. And then he explains, and then the other person's like, oh, can I come too? Because it's kind of like you get to the point where you're grateful that this thing is going on because of the growth, the opportunities that this problem presents. So he was like, yeah, we got plenty of, come on down, we got plenty of whatever. So it was just a fun, a fun, cool explanation or
like a reframing.
Yeah, reframing of it. The quote, I think, I don't know if he might have had the other quote, but shoot, where is it?
While you're saying that,
go ahead. Sorry.
I think I remembered that the quote that I'm thinking of was from a different thing that I watched of his, but I think it was still from him. Mm-hmm. And he was saying that the FM is like futility mode and AM is, I can't remember what the A stands for, but like ability Fancy. Or something like that. Yeah, I mean, but I think it was still from him. I'll have to go back and find my other notes, but.
I love at the end of that little pretend phone call conversation that he has with his buddy. Like, hey, by the way, I'm going to share my problem with you, but next time you have a problem, you better call me. Better share. Like,
not only that, he said something like, "Oh, you don't have any problems? Oh,
I'm
don't
sorry.
worry, you'll get some." Yeah,
yeah, he's like, I'm sorry. I'm sure you'll get one. Yeah. Just be patient.
So I think it was either similar to the quote that you had, or it's it's the same one. I don't know, but it says, never tackle a problem in the same level that it appears. Mm-hmm. A problem is designed to elevate you. Like, I'm not 100% about the problem is designed, because I don't really see God just sitting there, okay, let's put them in this hamster cage now and see what happens. But that's the first part of the quote in regards to how we need to look at problems. Just having that mindset shift right away when the problem shows up. You don't look at the problem in the same level that you're in. You don't look at the problem in the physical. You don't look at the problem, in the place where it appears. You have to look at it from a completely different plane, from above. And I mean, if you think about it, just putting yourself in that situation, there is so much that small exercise of reframing or shifting your perspective does to the emotions that these problems or situations will cause, that it's just amazing. I mean, that in itself is, I think it's got to be some sort of technique. Don't look at the problem in the carnal or in the world or whatever, in the physical. Look at it from a completely different perspective and realize, okay, there are other things going on here that are not visible, and that I have the tools, not just, I have the tools to do something about this. And so the feelings of futility, the feelings of anger towards people, et cetera, are going to go away just by that simple point of looking at it in a different perspective. And then on top of that awesome tool, we have the other perspective of, oh, this is going to teach me, this is going to benefit me, this is going to elevate me to a different place, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to be able to have tools to deal with this problem next time it comes down the pike. I mean, just super crazy, super awesome.
Sure, and I think you use the word frame and reframe, and I think languages frame how we think. And if you look at different languages, they don't necessarily have words that are one-to-one comparisons for what we might have in English. And so if you want to be fluent in another language, for like Spanish, for example, that people would recommend immersing yourself in the culture. And I felt like that was a lot of kind of what he was encouraging us to do, is immerse ourselves in the culture of heaven, and then to begin to understand that language by being in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious. I've this dovetails into a bit more philosophical question that I can't help but ask. And when I started listening to Graham Cooke all those years ago, it was in unison with a season where I was pushing into some other things with you guys know Clint Harima, and we were working together and pushing into miracles and stuff like that. And we had a pretty, I don't know, it was ongoing discussion for a while, maybe a year, of the question, is it possible for anything to be against you? Right. I mean, if God is for us, who can be against us? And my question is God, I won't get into who's saved and all that, and is God for people and against people? Like, let's just assume everyone on this call is a believer or a Christian. And I do believe there's another philosophical question as to going beyond that. But just for the sake of keeping it simple, is it possible for anything to be against you?
I mean, I have to throw back a question, because I think about the story of Job. I think about, David and his lifestyle of being pursued by a king. I think about Jesus and his whole ordeal of being persecuted, and Judas. So if I going by that, I would say yes, but then I feel like you have a different answer or leading.
Well, that, yeah, I think you know what he would say about it. I think it's possible for things to be quote unquote against us. Do I think it's possible for things to conquer us or totally be bad? No, probably not. But obviously that does have, obviously you have as the person experiencing things, you have kind of that control a little bit, I would say.
Yeah. So how we frame it.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I then come back to. So is it possible for anything to be against you? If you frame it that everything is for you,
right,
then that is a different way of what I believe Graham Cooke is saying.
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing as a problem, right? And any problem that does come against you, quote unquote, is an upgrade. It's an opportunity. It is, and he doesn't drill down and ask it in that way, but it is something that in my own journey over the last few years, I have started asking, is there anything against me? Is it even possible for something to be against me? And I do agree that it absolutely has everything to do with how it's framed. But who's the one that does the framing? Right.
Yeah, I think that's up to us as individuals. The question that I would have, I guess, is how do you then this is a curiosity question solely.
Mm-hmm.
How do you just welcome everything into your life then? Do you just, every single thing that comes, you're just like, oh yeah, cool, or what?
As far as so zen that saying everything is for me, that I don't try to change anything.
Essentially it does feel like it could be a really passive way of approaching life, potentially.
It certainly can be I dare say any spiritual truth can be turned into or abused or turned into an opportunity for something. And in that case, I would say that it definitely, everything's as it should be and nothing is wrong, can certainly make people lazy and can make people so passive that they don't engage in the world. It's no different than realizing that everything is a framework and everything is a dream. And the Toltec stuff with Don Miguel Ruiz, you can get to the point where no, everyone's dream is what it is, and nothing's wrong. Well, yeah, except that there are people who are. I mean, the truth is, and Don Miguel Ruiz would agree. The truth is, if you get your arm cut off, it hurts. So it's not exactly like, oh, it's fine. So if anything is true, there's a way in which it is true. And to me, I'm not advocating passivity by any means, but there is an energy in which you work towards changing your life.
Sure, yeah.
And if you're fighting an enemy, or if you're fighting the circumstances, or you're feeling like this is against me, this is a problem, and if I lose, I'm in trouble, versus like, no, this is something I don't enjoy, but this is for me. This is there. How do I? It's exactly his phone call. Hey man, what's up? Yeah. Guess what showed up in the mail today? I got a problem. Yeah, it's a big one. Yeah, it's a really big one. I'm so excited. I haven't opened it yet. I was going to wait for you to come over. Like that's his phone call, right? And it is how he views. So yeah, there's a problem. It's been defined as a problem. It's been defined as something that I don't want. But is it against me? Is it something that I could lose to? Is the win-lose energy, the for or against energy, versus no, this is for me. I'm going to work my way through it as quickly as possible and get to something that I enjoy more, but it's still for me. And that's kind of where I've landed on it, and the idea that that even the worst things are still for me. And I use the analogy, you've heard the Biosphere 1 before they got to Biosphere 2. One of the major lessons they learned from Biosphere 1 was that when all the trees that grew up started getting fruit on them, the fruit was, if it was lopsided, and it would pull the trees over from the roots. So the trees were beautiful and like gorgeous and everything like that, but they couldn't withstand the weight of fruit because they realized that they had forgotten wind in the construction of the first biosphere. So that it was wind that created strength, and it was quote unquote adversity that creates character and all of those things. And so, having wind, having quote unquote problems, is not to say that I want to live in a world that's just nonstop wind, but it is to say when it comes, it can still be for you.
Sure. I think one of the ways he described it that was helpful to me was when he talked about how, like, when that problem comes, like, understand that it's a great thing, because that's your time at the level that you are now has come to an end, and it's time for you to go to the next level. And so that requires something of you, and is uncomfortable as growth is, because growth requires change, and we don't like change. We fear change, but
we want it.
Yeah.
We desperately want everything to change. We just don't want to have to change anything.
I mean, we think we want change, but then so much of the time we're just so comfortable that there's an extent to which we don't really want change. A lot of times, or a lot of people, or in a lot of situations, because it feels like, oh, who am I in that new stage? What do I have to do to get to that new stage? Like, we want to be on the other side, I guess, a lot of times. But even being on the other side can be a super scary thing, I think. But saying that about the trees reminded me of the same thing with like butterflies. If you help them open up their cocoon, then their wings are not strong enough to fly. So I've heard. I can't say that I've done that, but
right.
But I guess for me, I think it's helpful for me to look at it in a little bit different way, as opposed to what Graham's language was, with the whole, like David even mentioned, with the designed problems thing. Because I look at it also as a parent, and how as parents we would not purposefully, like, we wouldn't put crappy situations with our kids and be like, good luck, it's time for you to get better, or whatever.
You've been
I see it
long enough.
I see it more as like God gives us like an opportunity for a new responsibility, in a sense, and a new way for us to grow, as opposed to here's a I mean, and it's semantics, obviously, but
well, it's energy.
For me, it helps. Yeah, for
True.
me, it helps to look at it in that way. And to be honest, when I was listening through this video, I was thinking, man, I don't even know for sure. I personally wouldn't have chosen to put it on our site at this stage that I'm at. And maybe, I don't know, because there are a number of different things that he said that I was like, I don't really quite agree with him on. But obviously we're having a good discussion around it, and it's still a lot of there were still a lot of good things in there, but there were definitely there were some bones in it. One of the other things that he talked about that was such a cool story was the lady that came up to him and said she had cancer, and how he said he doesn't do births,
deaths, or
marriages, yeah.
Or
and
weddings.
something that what
or weddings, I'm not sure.
Weddings, something like
weddings.
that. Marriages, I don't know. But something he said about was like, well, I mean, I don't know if it was her time to go because she's a little bit older and whatever. Like, to me, I was like, my personal belief, and I don't know, this is me, but I don't see God needing to use sickness as a way to quote unquote graduate someone to a different stage of life. But anyway, that's just me. But the story that he told about it was so cool. How I don't know if you guys were going to mention this story, but there was a girl who had a dream. I guess I'm telling it in a bad order.
Reverse order?
The lady, yeah, sorry. The lady, so she was all worried, and she kept bugging him about her cancer. Every couple days she would call him. And eventually, like about 17 days in, I think it was, she was in the grocery store and ran into a lady and her daughter, and the daughter kept being like, Mom, this is the lady that was in my dream. And she had a dream where she was up in heaven, and there was the picture of the lady on Jesus' desk, and Jesus said to give this lady this piece of paper that had something written on it. Is that correct so far? Mm-hmm. And so the girl woke up with a paper in her hand, which is just crazy. And so she gave this paper to the lady, and it said, I am the Lord that heals you, something like that, yeah. I think. That's a crazy story. And that's one of those things that to me is like, God doesn't do that kind of thing all the time. So it always makes me wonder, like, what is it about some situations that you get those crazy results or those crazy interactions, and then other situations it just seems like nothing. That's just one of those things.
Definitely. And I think he kind of touched on it as he was talking about it. I think there's a lot of things that bring to the story, or why you think about, people and their individual personalities and what they need to go through to experience healing. And then you think about, I'm the same person, but what I need today might be something different than tomorrow or the next day or 6 months from now. And so it's just that perfect combination of, what do I bring? What do I need? What's my love language? How am I going to receive that message? And then what do I need in that experience to grow and to move on? So that's my 2 cents on that piece.
I mean, I think that the one thing that he was saying kind of throughout the whole message or whatever was asking God, who do you want to be to me in this situation?
Ooh, that was good.
And I think that's always a good question to ask, regardless of any outlying variables or whatever. Like, that's still always a valid question, I think. And everything being about relationship, basically, and there's not formulas. As much as we want formulas, because they feel safer and they feel like you can control them.
As I'm, you guys are parents of children's that are at the age of learning all sorts of stuff all the time. And I use, we're going to talk about, in the next episode, we're talking about Christopher Blackaby's teaching. And he talks about in there about when his dad took away his training wheels.
Mhm.
and how he was so scared and cried and cried and cried. And then when his dad did it, he fell over on purpose.
Mhm.
Right. And, just the idea of like, it's one of my few memories, but I remember the day that my training wheels came off. And, I remember falling twice and then I got it. Right.
Mhm.
I remember falling, once in the grass, and it was just part of the reason I fell was because I was trying to ride my bike in the grass. And my dad wanted me to, and when I fell, it would be softer. And then it was kind of, no, you're going to have to, try it the good old fashioned hard way, because it's hard to ride the bike in the grass when you're first trying anyway. So, sure enough, went on the driveway and fell over and skinned my knee and my elbow. And, it was painful, but, I was okay. And there's an element of, again, is that against you? Is that, and it is, I love how he talks about when you have certain problems, especially the big ones, that it is an opportunity for an upgrade. And here's the reality of it, is that problems demand that you change their circumstances, and a lot of problems will stay around unless you do change them.
Mhm.
And so by default, buried inside of the problem is the fact that you have to upgrade to not have the problem anymore.
Mhm.
Right. So it's not just like this fancy way of like, oh, well, no, it actually is. We have to do it anyways. So you might as well be a little bit more joyful while you're doing it. Right. You're going to have to go through this problem anyways, and you're going to have to get it out of your life anyways. And you're going to have to use tools that you can't solve the problem by the same, things that got you into the problem.
Mhm.
And so if you're going to have to upgrade anyways, you might as well frame it in such a way that says, well, this is really annoying and crappy, and thank you,
Mhm.
and maybe improve your experience in the midst of it. But I don't know, there's so many things. And that's where, does God give cancer to teach people a lesson? I definitely don't have any part of me that says God gives anything bad to punish. That punishment concept
Right.
is just stupid. But the idea of growth and learning, and God gave me this versus he let me have this versus I attracted it, who is
Mhm.
God in some ways, and all of that stuff. I think the reality is that there is a lot more nuance to each individual situation. But the reality of problems being an opportunity for an upgrade, and how you frame it in such a way as to be joyful while you're in it. We could talk about all the other things, but those two takeaways,
Right.
that opportunity for an upgrade and that your attitude while you're in it could be, you have a choice how to view that energetically, view that problem. Those, regardless of where you go following the other things, I think those are really two good takeaways from this video.
That reminds me of what he said about every problem comes with a promise and and provision. So you will never, basically, the concept is you're never going to encounter a problem that doesn't already have the solution, that you don't already have access to the solution or whatever. And obviously, when you think about all the different kinds of circumstances in life, it doesn't feel like it can be true. Or like, I think where we tend to shrink back is that we've seen so many things that didn't turn out in what seemed like a good way, and that can make us feel like, can we really believe for a good outcome? And I personally, I don't like the way that a lot of religion or the church or whatever has made excuses for God that, well, yeah, we didn't get the outcome that we wanted, but like, it'll be fine in heaven or whatever. Like, I personally want to believe for a grander display of God being able to work things out than just, well, someday. And I know there's different thoughts about that, but that's my personal.
I think sometimes we create our own journey, our own narrative of what it should look like. And, oh, well, it's positive. It's helping everyone. So therefore God has his voice in it and he's backing me up on this. But at the same time, we're all our own individual kings in our kingdoms. And I can't cross into your kingdom and say, hey, this is how you should govern your heaven. It's your business, right? And so that's the effect is when I come in and say this is what it should be, and it doesn't come that way. Why? Well, it wasn't mine to govern. It wasn't mine to make that choice. And we have to be okay with something that as a society we've pegged as negative could be positive in that situation. And you have to flip the narrative and look at it through God's eyes and perspective, and just say, I have to. It came this way, but why? And how do I figure out how to align my thought process into the reality of what happened?
You use the word narrative, and it's kind of creeping into something that I wanted to touch on. Just this idea of language that Graham talks about, and then something else that a lot of other speakers that I really enjoy kind of dig into is the idea that the story we tell ourselves. Every day we wake up and we tell ourselves a story about our lives. And we frame our lives through this narrative, and the outside influences we allow to shape that story, the ways that we shape it ourselves that are not ideal. I think what Graham's doing, calling us to do, is use language that puts you where he's trying to get us where we should be. I don't know how to say that in a more artful way. But the story you tell yourself matters. If you believe certain things about yourselves, then you're going to operate from that place where those beliefs would be true. And so if you believe yourself, to be poor, I mean, this is a overused example, but if you think yourself, or you believe yourself to be poor, even when you get money, you will not spend it in the way that a person who considers themselves to be wealthy would spend it. Necessities and all that kind of spending aside, the poor person will see this money as, well, I'm poor. I don't often get this chance, so I'm gonna take it right now, and I'm gonna enjoy the finer things, and instead of taking the opportunity to invest it wisely, so that it multiplies and it becomes an abundance. And that's just a very narrow way to describe that situation. But I don't know. Does that speak to any of you?
Yeah, I agree. Or sometimes people would, in fear, just hold on to it and also not enjoy it.
Right.
There's
Sure.
like a both sides
Storehouse,
of the,
yeah.
I feel like there's a parable in the Bible about this.
It seems like it.
I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Do you truly believe that the kingdom is here?
Isn't there a song about that? Sorry.
There's lots of them.
I think I know where you're kind of.
Where's heaven?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he doesn't talk about it, or he talks about it in a different form in this video. But to answer your first question, I think the kingdom is here, but it shows more impactfully in people's lives depending on their development in the kingdomhoodship of that.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
The kingdomhood ship.
Right. No,
Right.
because again, like if you don't believe that, God is in you and you are God and you can walk in that authority, then you're not attracting kingdom level blessings or situations in your life, because it's just like, oh, there's this big God in the sky who has to heal me and take care of me, and I have to ask for him. And it ties a lot into the Chris video I watched, right? So I'm trying to keep it separate, but so I think, yes, it's here for those who are aware of it and access it. In short,
in shorter, wherever I go, that's where the party's at.
Yeah.
the kingdom party.
Yeah, and I don't know if that stems somewhat from what I said earlier about heaven someday or whatever, and I said that in the context of how people tend to think about it.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I definitely believe that the kingdom is here, that we have access to all the stuff. Yeah, like Jen said, if we understand and believe it and walk in it. But I feel like that's definitely a bit of a growing journey type of thing, where we're experiencing it or not, and growing in our understanding of how to experience. But I think like definitely a huge component of it is this discussion about how we understand our experience in general.
I think for me, there is a very, very broad question about the meaning of life that's buried in here. Are we here to live once, win the prize, and get eternal reward or eternal damnation? Do we reincarnate and come back until we win the prize? Or are we? Is this all just part of the overall gig of consciousness, and there's no separation between any of it? And it is a very broad discussion. I'm not trying to have that discussion. I only ask the question of where's the kingdom, where's heaven? Is it here? In that, if people can frame it that there's no such thing as a problem, and that nothing is against you, or that all problems are opportunities for upgrades, or whatever, it does, and you don't even think about it, but it often bumps up against your subconscious perspective of what Earth is even about lessons and about growth and about heaven and hell and reward and punishment and all that. There's this really kind of unspoken soup underneath all of that, that has about a gazillion and one assumptions that if you examine those, and again, my favorite quote, if anything is true, there's a way in which it is true. And I would, venture to say that Graham Cooke, if he's saying anything, is that, enjoy the process, enjoy what heaven brings into your life, even if it's something you don't like, and find ways to work with it and grow with it. And I think that's one of the things I love about Graham Cooke is he doesn't really get super theological. He just does what he can to, like a good, a grandfather, just kind of like, well, just think about it differently. Maybe I've learned a few things in my day. Maybe think about it this way. And it's nothing fancy, but it is what you think about all of those other questions really will color what you think about problems, and what you think about growth, and what you think about why they come, where they came from, what to do with them, and everything like that. So I ask it more just to kind of poke or point people into that soup of 1,001 questions, and then leave it from there, I guess, because we ain't got time to cover that. That's for sure.
Graham kicked off his sermon with this idea that the world around us is often very times negative, and that kind of sneaks into our shaping our lens of how we see the world. And the word that comes to mind of that is it's insidious. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term, insidious, but it's just the idea that, like, you don't see it coming. I used to do a lot of flying, and we would have these flights that would be depressurized flights. I mean, like if you ever fly, you hear sometimes they say this flight is pressurized for your comfort. Well, I would fly in planes that weren't pressurized, and so when you went up to certain altitudes, you had to have oxygen masks on. And if there was an issue with your oxygen mask, sometimes it would result in a condition called hypoxia, where you're just oxygen deficient. The thing about it is that it's insidious. It sneaks up on you. You don't realize that you're not getting enough oxygen. And it's funny, you can go on YouTube and watch guys that are going through decompression chambers, and they're doing exercises to see how hypoxia impacts them. And maybe show them like a deck of cards, and have them call out, like, Ace of Spades, King of Hearts, 9 of Diamonds, whatever it is. And then they'll get to a certain spot where the oxygen deprivation has kind of reached a critical point, and they'll just be stuck. And they'll keep changing cards, but they'll still be on 9 of diamonds. 9 of diamonds. 9 of diamonds. And I think it's easy when you're surrounded by negativity to have that reshape the way that you see the world and then not realize it until you're in a bad way and you've reached this critical point. And then sometimes, maybe in a way similar to somebody in that oxygen scenario, you need somebody to help snap you out of it and help you get hooked up to some oxygen so that you can see that things aren't as dreary as the picture you've painted. And an interesting thing about that oxygen deprivation is that not only do you not necessarily not see what's there, but you lose the ability to see color. And so everything kind of goes black and white, and you don't realize it. And so it polarizes what you do see. And so I think, I don't know, maybe I'm getting ahead of us. Maybe we should kind of take it around the table here. But just, it's the way we see the world is not always what is actually there. And if we can see the world through the language of heaven, it's going to be extremely beneficial.
Definitely. I think that's a great analogy, at least for myself. I was like, I got to take notes on that, because I think it's really easy to be around people who are negative and then you follow suit. And so being really mindful of your energy that you bring to the room, and then the energy that the room that you're walking into, and that takes this. He talked about, we're supposed to be in continual prayer with God, but once you start speaking the language of heaven, all of a sudden you get everything that you want, and there's no longer prayer requests. And I hope I'm not mixing my videos on that one as I'm speaking and thinking. But that's that concept of, I no longer have to say, Father, help me, Father, give me this, Father, which way do I go? We have this connection with him, and it's just, okay, I need to turn it on. Okay, I'm going. And then I can go walk in my glory or God's glory. They're the same. So there's that.
I think it's easy to forget, especially with spiritual discussions. It's like we bought into this idea or this energy, this lie that of polarization. Like, it's either right or it's wrong, right? It's the knowledge of good and evil. It's black and white. And that's kind of that, even the question of, is it possible for anything to be against you? Is it against you or is it for you? Well, come on. Like, the nuance of energy, the nuance of reality in every individual scenario. I mean, Scripture is loaded with, Paul trying to give people advice like, okay, so if you're hanging around this crowd and they feed you food that is sacrificed to idols and they tell you about it, then obviously they have it, so maybe you shouldn't. But then, like, if you're around this kind of people, then it's fine. It's no big deal, because it's not really about that, And it's just, look, if you're wanting a list, lists are black and white. Mm-hmm. That's called law. That's called Old Covenant. That's called no way in hell that will get you to heaven. Mm-hmm. And so you need the relationship. You need to understand that everything is nuanced. And then when a teacher comes along and talks about nuance, don't get mad at them, because they're telling the truth. So there you go. Excuse me.
Yeah, I really liked what Matt was sharing about, and I was looking for a quote that I can't quite remember exactly, but it's a guy, Jim Baker, that we follow somewhat, and he said something like, he's never known anyone who pays attention to the news to walk in any sort of power, or something like that. I don't remember the end part is the problem, but it was the concept of, he doesn't know anyone who pays attention to any of that negativity that has any sort of real power and success and whatever, I guess. I don't know. But I definitely resonate with that. And in the same context, I guess, because we haven't, or I should say, I don't know about David, but I haven't paid attention to the news in so many years. I never know what's going on for the most part. David kind of tells me a little bit here and there sometimes, like with politics or something. But we all do still, even if we're not paying attention to the news, there's still dialogues, monologues, various things going on in our own heads. And it's the same context that if we are tuning into negativity in our minds, it's still going to have the same effect. Obviously, with putting in that whole, what is it, the old Christian thing, or maybe not just Christian, but garbage in, garbage out concept. If we're getting away from the news, that's obviously going to be a helpful thing, but we still have to tune into the correct, a good channel in order to get a good station, in order to get good input, I guess.
That comment. See, I totally.
My problem is that I have so many notes that I just I can't find
well,
things.
I had the
It
thought
looks like
right
you have the
here.
same problem.
Okay, it says we grow up. This is a quote from the video. He says, "We grow up with the way the world thinks. In the kingdom, we do battle with the way the world thinks." And I think it's just a reiteration of what everybody has actually been saying, mostly. But the biggest thing that struck me is we do battle with it, as in it's not a passive thing. It's not we receive that information and we're just like, meh, you know, or we're passive about a problem or whatever. We do battle with it. We have to actively be mindful of the way that we think, the way that we frame situations. We have to be mindful of the narrative, and not let passivity, and not just let the natural way of thinking dominate what we see.
Right on. Well, since my story seemed to work a little bit with this, I'm going to keep going with it. I'm going to go take it personal here. And there was a time where I was working on a test, and we were flying up at 25,000 feet, depressurized. So we were on the masks, and usually when we're flying that high, we're the priority where I was working at. And for whatever reason, this particular day, we weren't the priority. There was something else that had to happen first. And so we ended up loitering, kind of just flying around in circles, waiting our turn for this thing. And you kind of have a limited window of how long you can be up that high, depressurized. And so we're going around in circles. I've been up there, I guess, we've all been up there about an hour. And I'm working on my crossword puzzle, and I'm starting to get a little nauseous. And it's been about 4.5 years since I'd done a decompression chamber where you kind of reassess your symptoms. And every 5 years, they want you to do that because as your age changes, as your physical level of activity changes, your body's response to a lack of oxygen also changes. Anyways, I'm starting to get a little nauseous. And so I look up, I'm like, oh, man, it's not going away. It's not going away. And then I was like, man, the lights in this plane are really bright. Like, what is going on in this plane right now? And so I looked down at the floor, which is metal, and it was reflecting the light. And I was like, oh, the floor is blinding too. This is ridiculous. And so I looked straight ahead at this big cargo bundle. It was covered in green cloth, and it had white straps on it. And I was like, these white straps are blinding. Wait, what? And it was that moment where it just didn't make sense. I was like, what? That's not the way it's supposed to be. And at that point, I realized I was critically short on oxygen. I was dying. And the way this plane was set up, I was pretty far away from our oxygen tech. And so I didn't want to jeopardize the test. The story I was telling myself about myself was that apparently it wasn't important as a test mission. And so I was like, I'll just go ahead and hyperventilate to fix this. And so I just was making a point, big panicky breaths, but on purpose, just to kind of resaturate my body with oxygen, get, whatever problem it was, I can fix it with more oxygen, was my thought. And it did. The symptoms went away, color vision returned, everything's good to go, and I got comfortable. And I started breathing normally again. And a little bit later, I was like, why are my legs numb?
Oh, gracious.
Why are my arms numb?
Oh, boy.
And it was it was Insidious. I didn't see it coming, and eventually I was like, all right, I don't know what's going to happen here, but I contacted the guy in charge of oxygen. I was like, I need emergency flow oxygen. Got me emergency flow oxygen. I felt fine. Everything returned to normal, and we completed the test. Everything was good. I don't know. The way that you see things, though, I mean, it stems from your beliefs, whether about your beliefs about yourself, the beliefs about the world around you, how you think things should be. And when you see the white strap blinding you, it's probably not okay. So, that's I think this conversation about the language of heaven has been another one worth having. And if you guys want to support what we're doing here, we've got our Patreon that you can donate to. You can be a patron. You can share this kind of stuff. You can like it. You can just let your friends know about it. If you're not actually clicking the share button or all that kind of stuff. We've got our social media, which is at Epoch Ideas. And anything else, gang?
EPOCH.
That's right.
You can also check out. There's going to be some study guides on the site. Jen's been working on those, and
Yes.
yeah, that's something that we're going to start offering. So
the site, also known as theepoch.org.
mm-hmm.
There you go. Come check us out.